I love how complex it is on the inside, but when you look at it from a distance, it's so simple and pure and elegant that you would never suspect that it's such an architectural masterpiece. Like, it follows all of the forms of a fugue, say a prelude, any type of the dance, but when you just listen to it, it's just a charming piece by itself. And you don't have to hear, like, oh, this is an allemande, oh, this is a sarabande. But, of course, it helps to know. So fugue is when there's 2, 3, 4, 5 voices, or more if you'd like. And each voice is basically just a line, and each line has a subject, but the subjects are all the same in each line. So say the first voice will enter with the subject, and when the subject is finished, then the second voice enters and does the subject, but usually in a different key. Then the third voice enters when the second voice is finished with its subject. Then the fourth voice enters when the third is done, and so on and so forth.
Out of the 48 total preludes and fugues in the Well-Tempered Clavier, and since I've learned 20, that means I have 28 more to go. Not bad.
In Bach's music, there's always a lot of lines going, and if you have, say, a 2-voice fugue, each line is completely independent from each other, which is really confusing to play, of course, because you have to pay attention to one character, and then the other one has to be a completely different character. But when you move on to the bigger fugues with 3, 4, 5 voices, that's a really, really hard task to do because you only have 2 hands, but you have to take care of basically 5 different people playing 5 different lines. And then on top of that, these 5 different people are interacting with each other in ways that are sometimes a bit surprising. Like, sometimes they like to, say, argue with each other, the voices interrupt each other, and other times they kind of play with each other, and it's a very friendly piece. But there's an outline in which they all work. So say there's a friendly part, and they all work together. But then after that, they suddenly turn against each other, so now they're angry at each other. So you have to create the distinction between those 2 characters, as well as the 5 different characters, as well as the interaction between those 5 characters. And the list goes on and on, of course. I'd have to say my favorite is The Art of Fugue, because this really showcases Bach's magnificent fugue writing. I mean, the entire 16 fugues are based on just one simple subject in the first fugue that comes in 4 different voices. But then it's kind of like a set of variations. You have 15 more fugues with each subject as a variation of the first subject. And that works really well because each one has a different subject, and each subject is unique in its own way in the fugue itself. And oftentimes, in each different fugue, he takes subjects from different fugues and puts them in. So I think there's some fugues that you have 3 different subjects at the same time, and others you have 2 different subjects at the same time. So now you're not dealing with just a fugue, you're dealing with a double fugue or a triple fugue. So a subject is basically like a very specific motif in a piece. You have, say, a line like da-dee-da-dee-da, and that is mirrored by da-da-da-da-da in the second voice. But then the third voice comes in doing da-da-da-da-da, and then the fourth voice comes in doing da-da-da-da-da. So it's always the same. The subject is always set, and the sequence of the notes is always the same. But often Bach will take little bits of that subject, cut it up, and place it random places in the fugue. Or he'll take the subject and transform it to completely different keys, or take it from major to minor and put it all over again. Okay, so when I was really young, I loved playing video games. And I kind of noticed that when you play video games, you have to be really, really focused. So if you're playing maybe Mario Kart on the Nintendo 64, so you're driving along, and of course there's a Koopa waiting to hit you. But if you blink, or you say, oh, I need to get something to eat, or I need some chips, so you put your controller down, and wham, the Koopa smashes into you, so you die, you lose life. And of course, you in video games you have plenty of lives, so it's okay. But in Bach, when you're performing, you don't have that kind of a privilege. So you have to stay really focused through the whole thing, and you can't stop. I think that was when I was 5 or 6. I think 6. I went to this piano competition in Oakland, and I was playing a piano concerto with my older piano teacher, and I think that was the first time I ever played in public, which is kind of interesting because it wasn't actually a performance, it was a competition. I mean, of course I get nervous, so I just try to focus on the music itself. I try not to think about anything besides the music. So usually before I walk on stage, I'm just kind of playing the piece over to myself again and again and walking through some of the spots where I know I need to be focused on what kind of a sound or character I'm producing. Often in Bach, if you make a big mistake, it's really difficult to find your way back. So it's almost necessary to just stop and start over again, which I've done that quite a few times. But if just little mistakes, like if you miss a couple of notes, I try to forget about that section and skip to maybe a few bars forward, so that a few bars forward, I know that I can keep playing and it'll be fine.